I just feel like it's
hypocritical
Muslims. To say that these attacks harmed women and children when those women and children, the young girls that you reference, would live a life in a barbaric, unequal society behind a burqa with no ability to make career choices.
This is Matt Schlapp, a conservative US commentator attempting to justify the killing of more than 160 girls aged 7 to 12 in a US strike on an elementary school in Iran on February 28, 2026. And according to his narrative, the girls killed in the strike are better off dead, so the US has somehow liberated them by killing them. This Western mentality framing women in Muslim countries it intends to occupy or attack as passive victims in need of being saved is not new. It is part of a centuries-old narrative written through a colonial lens. This is what scholars call colonial feminism or imperial feminism, which abuses the discourse around women's rights to justify Western domination, intervention, and control.
The women and children of Afghanistan have suffered enough. This great nation will work hard to bring them hope and help.
Too often, the West language of liberation serves geopolitical goals rather than the populations brutalized by Western interventions. And it certainly does not serve the so-called oppressed women in countries the US has bombed. The same narrative has been repeated in rhetoric surrounding Iran, with US officials making various statements about the goals of the joint war Washington launched with Tel Aviv on the sovereign Muslim nation. While the initial pretext for the unprovoked US-Israeli strikes was the myth of Iran's nuclear weapons, regularly peddled by Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and echoed by various US officials, including US President Donald Trump, numerous US talking heads, and members of the Trump administration, have subsequently justified the strikes on moral grounds, claiming the onslaught will liberate Iranian women, a call amplified by imperial feminists.
وای خدا وای خدا وای خدا اشهد ان لا اله الا الله اشهد ان محمد رسول الله
تکون نخور مادر الان درت میاری تموم شد تکون نخور وایسا من اینو رو دارم.
In reality, when imperial feminists talk about liberating women in backward Muslim countries, they only fixate on one thing, a piece of clothing. Or more precisely, traditional attire worn by most practicing Muslim women. Imperial feminists stay silent when Palestinian women are raped by Israeli soldiers and deny the abuse and oppression they're subjected to under Israeli occupation, but are up in arms about the burqa and even the hijab can send them into a fit of rage. But few in the West have done any homework on Iran, or maybe imperial feminism is just deliberately selective and superficial. Because a simple review of Iran's modern history refutes the simple binary of oppression versus freedom that the West often imposes. In the 1930s, women were forced to unveil, and the hijab was criminalized under the Western-backed Pahlavi monarchy led by Reza Shah. As anti-imperialist Prime Minister Mossadegh gained power in the 1950s, the West backed a plan to overthrow him. Reza Shah's son, Mohammad Reza Shah, consolidated power through the MI6 and CIA-backed coup in 1953. 10 years later, he launched the White Revolution aimed at modernizing Iran. But the man claiming to be so modern and progressive had very controversial and backwards views on women.
I'm quoting, Your Majesty. In a man's life, women count only if they are beautiful, graceful, and know how to stay feminine. You may be equal in the eyes of the law, but not in ability. You have never produced a Michelangelo or a Bach or even a great cook. You are schemers, you are evil, all of you. Oh, Your Majesty, you said all these things.
Not with the same words, no.
Well, the thought, you've never produced a Michelangelo, a Bach, or even a great
cook. This I
cook.
have said.
So you don't feel that women are in that sense equal, that they have the same intelligence or ability?
Not so far, maybe you will become in the future. You can always have some exceptions.
After the 1979 revolution to overthrow the Shah, veiling became mandatory, and soon the West used it as a propaganda tool to feed its ongoing imperialist narrative. It sought to frame women in Muslim countries as oppressed and paint Iran as evil. But Iran is not the first place where women were used as part of the West's geopolitical battleground. To understand how this narrative began, We must go back to colonial rule across the region. In British-occupied Egypt, colonial officials framed Muslim women as oppressed to justify their rule. Lord Cromer, the British administrator of Egypt, openly criticized the veil as a symbol of backwardness, all while opposing women's education in Britain. Egyptian women were anything but backward, however, and actively mobilized against British occupation during the Egyptian Revolution, with prominent women's rights activist Huda Sha'rawi organizing a march with hundreds of women to protest against British colonialism on March 15, 1919. The march was one of the key events that would eventually topple British rule. Decades later, another Western occupying power turned unveiling into a colonial spectacle. On May 16, 1958, following an uprising in Algiers against French occupation and amid the Algerian War of Independence, the wives of French generals rounded up dozens of Algerian women in choreographed ceremonies and forcibly unveiled them. A propaganda campaign aimed at proving that Algerian women were being won over by European values and supported French rule. Anti-colonial Algerian intellectual Frantz Fanon claimed that the spectacles were part of France's goal to conquer Algerian women in order to conquer Algeria. Later, historians found that many of the Algerian women who had been unveiled had either been coerced into participating through intimidation tactics or had never worn the veil in the first place. But behind this staged performance aimed at showcasing France as the liberator of the women it was colonizing, Algerian women were actually being subject to rampant and brutal sexual violence. When the French discovered that local women were playing an important role in operations targeting the French army, occupation forces began carrying out widespread rape and sexual torture, desecrating women's bodies and using them as instruments of domination. Similar mechanisms were at play in Libya, where Italian colonial rule marketed itself as a civilizing mission. Italian colonists said they wanted to rescue Libyan women from the tyranny of Libyan men. But when the women they claimed to be liberating resisted Italian occupation, they were sent to internment camps, among other punishments. Between the 1930s and 1960s, while women across the global south were framed by the West as backward and oppressed, they were actively resisting colonial oppression. The West saw them as subservient and disempowered. But in cities like Damascus, Beirut, and Tehran, women were holding congresses on suffrage, labor rights, and education. All sectors of society colonial powers sought to destroy in order to disempower the indigenous people they had colonized. By the 1970s, the women's liberation movement in the West began to acknowledge that women in regions occupied by Western imperial regimes were suffering under that very Western occupation, and the myth of the West as the liberator of women began to crumble. But tensions between imperialism and global feminism began to emerge in the 1980s, when Western feminism was employed to uphold colonialism by recycling old narratives framing women in Western colonized countries as oppressed, even though their primary oppressor was the West itself. At the 1985 UN Women's Conference, American feminist Betty Friedan reportedly urged Egyptian women's rights activist Nawal al-Saadawi not to mention Palestine, where women were seeking emancipation not from indigenous systems, but rather from imperial colonization via the Western-sponsored Israeli occupation. That moment reflects a deeper shift. As Western feminism became increasingly institutionalized, it began to detach women's rights from the anti-colonial struggle and became what we know today as colonial feminism, an imperialist feminism that promotes Western intervention as a moral imperative to liberate oppressed women in Western-occupied regions.
I'm Laura Bush, and I'm delivering this week's radio address to kick off a worldwide effort to focus on the brutality against women and children by the Al-Qaeda terrorist network and the regime it supports in Afghanistan, the Taliban. The fight against terrorism is also a fight for the rights and dignity of women.
In September 2001, the US President George W. Bush launched Washington's infamous war on terror. A month later, his wife Laura Bush cheered on the US invasion of Afghanistan in a White House address. She framed the war as a means of liberating women from brutality. The US claimed it was bombing and occupying Afghan women into freedom. But after dragging the country through 20 years of war, the US invasion led to the deaths of more than 176,000 Afghans, including thousands of women. Western imperialists had prescribed them death as freedom. And while imperial feminist icons like Gloria Steinem supported the US invasion of Afghanistan and urged the international community to save Afghan women, it was US intervention itself, through its support for the Mujahideen in the 1980s, that helped create the conditions that eventually led to the Taliban's rise.
The people we are fighting today, we funded 20 years ago. And we did it because we were locked in this struggle with the Soviet Union. They invaded Afghanistan, and we did not want to see them control Central Asia. And we went to work. And it was President Reagan, in partnership with the Congress, led by Democrats, who said, you know what, sounds like a pretty good idea. Let's deal with the ISI and the Pakistani military, and let's go recruit these mujahideen.
The US retreated from war-ravaged Afghanistan in 2021. The summary of this war on terror and the result for the Afghan women it claimed to save. The liberation promised to them by foreign powers not only failed to protect them, but also reinforced the very conditions that have allowed the Taliban to dominate.
20 years ago, when the US came here, one of their priorities they proclaimed was women's rights.
Yeah.
How do you feel that the international community has left Afghan women now? What's their situation?
The international community left Afghan women the same way they left Afghanistan. Like a hot potato. Burned their hands, dropped it. Even dropped. They couldn't care less for the Afghan women. They couldn't care less to what happened to the Afghan people. They couldn't care less. And this is a fact, and I will scream it from the highest mountain in this world.
Iraqi women faced a similar trajectory. British colonialism had fragmented Iraqi women's rights through tiered legal systems. But in 1959, Iraqi Prime Minister Abdul Karim Qasim introduced a secular, unified civil framework for personal matters and enacted the Progressive Personal Status Code as part of Iraq's constitution. The new framework reflected a commitment to modernity, gender equality, and national sovereignty. As always, national sovereignty was a problem for the West. And just 4 years later, Qasim was toppled in a CIA-backed operation due to his anti-imperialist policies that threatened Western oil interests. His ouster led to the immediate rollback of rights women had gained under his rule. With the US-backed ouster, Iraqi women found themselves under an authoritarian Ba'athist regime that reversed Qasim's gender equality reforms. And when the West began to meddle with Iraq once again in 1991 through bombs and sanctions, women's rights encountered even more setbacks with the collapse of infrastructure and the public sector, as well as a conservative backlash that issued restrictive gender codes. In 2003, just 12 years later, Iraq was again invaded. This time by a US-led coalition that further crippled not just women's rights in Iraq, but also their lives and livelihoods. But the US's invasion of the country, dubbed Operation Iraqi Freedom, and its support in toppling then-President Saddam Hussein didn't deliver freedom. Rather, it left women even more vulnerable, facing ongoing oppression at the hands of extremist groups that emerged from sectarian militias that Washington had previously propped up.
In the images of celebrating Iraqis, we have also seen the ageless appeal of human freedom. Decades of lies and intimidation could not make the Iraqi people love their oppressors or desire their own enslavement. Men and women in every culture need liberty like they need food and water and air. Everywhere that freedom arrives, humanity rejoices. And everywhere that freedom stirs, let tyrants fear.
A similar pattern can be observed in both Libya and Syria, where Western intervention has led to ongoing instability, fractured societies, and extremist backlash that has reversed advances women made towards gender equality. All while warmongers like former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton claimed to be feminists working towards women's rights.
So we came, we saw, he died.
Very much.
Diane Rodham Clinton.
That's my name. That's right.
War criminal. The people of Libya, the people of Iraq, the people of Syria, the people of Yemen, the people of Palestine, as well as the people of America
Algeria, Libya, Egypt, Palestine, Lebanon, Syria, Afghanistan, Iraq, Iran. All countries ravaged by Western colonialism or Western intervention. All countries where women may have been dealing with local forms of inequality, but had relative agency before the West began to meddle.
This is your opportunity to stand up and let your voices be heard. As I said yesterday and many times before, Israel's fight is not with you. Our fight is with our common enemy, a murderous regime that both oppresses you and impoverishes you.
It seems the rhetoric used by the US ahead of its invasions of Afghanistan and Iraq was once again recycled, this time to manufacture consent for the US-Israeli strikes on Iran. In June 2025, when Israel had already bombed hundreds of Iranian civilians to death, Netanyahu even cynically invoked women's liberation to justify Israel's deadly strikes. And what about the women in other territories Israel is bombarding? In Lebanon, Israeli attacks have devastated civilian life. Since March 2026, more than 1 million people have been displaced. Entire communities have been forced to flee. And the bombs don't discriminate according to gender. They spare no one. For women, the consequences are immediate and devastating. At least 11,000 pregnant women in Lebanon have been directly affected, not to mention many others without access to functioning hospitals, as clinics have been damaged or forced to shut down. Women have been forced to give birth while fleeing, on roadsides, in overcrowded shelters, cut off from basic medical care. In Palestine's Gaza, the scale is even more catastrophic. For over 2 years, Israel's genocide has pushed Palestinian women and girls to the brink of survival. Over 33,000 Palestinian women and girls have been killed since October 2023. Those who have survived face other challenges. Israel's deliberate starvation campaign has devastated expecting mothers and newborn babies. And there are at least 2,600 documented cases of pregnant women starving to the point of miscarriage in Gaza. Meanwhile, those who did give birth did so with minimal care, often displaced in overcrowded camps with no privacy. Furthermore, documented reports show that Israeli soldiers have systematically raped Palestinian women and men alike, using sexual violence as a weapon. And while rapes of Palestinians increased after October 7, 2023, Israel has effectively been using sexual torture as punishment for Palestinian women in the occupied West Bank for decades.
Stop. 17 17
And yet, Israel claims to champion women's liberation, while its soldiers demean Palestinian women by posing with underwear they've stolen, subject them to aggressive strip searches, and abuse them in detention across Gaza and Palestine's occupied West Bank. Meanwhile, female Israeli soldiers are then presented as feminist icons, co-opting feminism and associating killing with women's empowerment. And all this in spite of record cases of rape within the Israeli army itself.
This International Women's Day, we recognize the 30 female aircrew members, pilots, and navigators taking part in Operation Roaring Lion, carrying out missions in the skies over Iran with precision, focus, and courage. Today, we honor the women in the IDF who rise to every challenge.
روز جهانی زن را به خواهران شجاعم در اسرائیل و ایران تقدیم می‌کنم که با قدرت در خط اول دفاع برای کشورشان ایستادند.
A military that bombs women and is plagued by sexual violence within its own ranks is no blueprint for women's liberation. Still, the West never grows weary of its civilizing missions or the narratives that sustain them. In just 4 weeks since the US and Israel launched a joint war on Iran, more than 1,500 people have been killed and over 3.2 million displaced.
It's all about war against imperialists because in this world you don't have the third option. You either have to fight with them or you have to be their slave. We choose not to be a slave, and that's why the struggle of Iranians, Palestinians, Lebanese, Syrians, we are all connected. It's the same thing. I was living in Europe. I came in the second day of war just to say that I'm here, I'm in my country, it's our land, and here will be your grave. Here will be the grave of anyone who has the plan of big Israel.
While the US and Israel bomb civilian infrastructure across Iran, including hospitals and universities, both essential for women's empowerment, as Trump himself has faced charges of sexual abuse, as women's rights are rolled back in the US, and as rape and pedophilia are all but normalized in Israel. The hypocrisy of Western rhetoric is becoming so transparent that even Washington's usual allies are taking some distance, and the true motives of Western interventionism are being exposed.